Hey everyone, Corterri here. This is Dark Souls 3. I mean, you probably already knew this, I think. Anyway, it's the third Dark Souls installment, released in the spring of 2016, about 6 years ago. Some of you might be wondering, is this shit still worth playing? But probably not, because you already know the answer to that question. I'm not a Dark Souls veteran in any way. I didn't start off playing Demon Souls, or even Kingsfield. To be honest, I usually avoid games that are hard on purpose, which makes me sound pretty casual when I say it out loud. Despite my dislike for difficulty in video games, Dark Souls 3 is actually one of the best games I've ever played. So if you've never played any Dark Souls games, here's a review from someone who also has no previous experience with the series. And if you have already played Dark Souls 3 or games like it in the past, I'll probably sound like I'm just saying a lot of obvious shit. Dark Souls 3 is an action role-playing video game. It's in third person because we want to see all that delicious armor, but also because there's a lot of combat, and you need to be aware of the shit around you. Combat is a very important aspect of Dark Souls 3, in fact I'd say it's 99.5% of the gameplay. There's a really good array of weapons to take down your enemies. You'll come across a variety of melee and ranged weapons, and even magic can be used in combat. A fair assortment of shields are also featured to help you block incoming attacks. These weapons can be upgraded at Andre the Blacksmith's shop with various gems. Armor of all kinds can be collected, and I believe you can get most, if not all, the armors you see in the game, so eventually you too can look like that boss that keeps kicking your fucking teeth in. Now about the actual fighting. These Souls games have a reputation for being impossibly hard. And these assessments are very right. It might seem at first that Dark Souls 3 is for people who hate themselves or like you got robbed by From Software, but the reality is that this game and others like it are actually more fair than you'd think. The enemies and bosses aren't as random or unstoppable as they seem, except when they are. They telegraph their attacks so that the player has a chance to time their dodges and plan out counterattacks. And that's really what the combat is about. Timing. Like Guitar Hero, but with swords. That's why you'll die so many times in the game. It takes time to recognize these attack patterns. The quicker you train yourself to stop button mashing, the quicker you'll stop dying. After you get it down though, you come to realize that the combat actually feels pretty rewarding. It's still pretty fucking hard though, no matter how good you get at it. In addition to timing your attacks, you'll have to watch your stamina bar, which depletes anytime you swing your weapon, run, dodge, or even get hit with your shield up. By the way, don't just constantly hold your shield up, the enemy will eventually stumble you. The stamina bar refills pretty fast, but it takes your primitive brain a while to train itself not to get greedy and take that extra swing. Doing so might leave you with too little stamina to get away from the enemy's counterattack. I've read online that out of all of the Dark Souls in the series, they've really refined this one's controls to be the most beginner-friendly out there of the entire series. Whatever that's supposed to mean. Like other games of the Souls series, there's a heavy focus on boss fights in Dark Souls 3, and each one is uniquely epic in its own way. I mean, aren't all bosses in games epic anyway? The ones from Dark Souls 3 though are all massive abominations, and each one makes you feel like it's the final boss. Their fighting styles are all different, which will force you to rethink your strategy with each one. Each boss is very well designed, being grotesque mutations of stock fantasy characters. They fucking mean dark fantasy. Who doesn't want to fight a fat pustule-covered tree? What kind of sick fucking bastard thought of this? Some are optional, although my biggest complaint about them is that you can't refight the bosses. What you can refight over and over are all of the normal enemies that respawn whenever you hit a bonfire. These two can be rather epic and grotesque. Exercise caution because even the lowest enemy can kill your ass dead if you're being carelessly stupid. Dark Souls 3 uses a level up system which can get very grindy, mind you. Generally, I've never been a fan of grinding in video games, from Pokemon to really any MMO. It just seems like a massive time sink of repetitiveness. I'd see my friend doing it and thought, why the hell would anyone want to kill the same thing over and over again? At the same time, I'd wonder, why do I suck at these games so bad? Dark Souls 3 kind of changed my perspective on this. Despite the game kicking my fucking balls, I just really wanted to get better at it. Maybe it was because it was so hard at first that I found the grinding fun and rewarding when I finally got the hang of it. I found myself meticulously saving up for that next level so I could kick ass a little bit harder next time. The level up system is pretty Byzantine when you first start. Hell, I still have trouble picking out the right attributes to upgrade, but that's why we have the internet, right? Leveling up requires the collection of souls, the game's currency and experience both rolled into one number counter, accumulated from killing enemies. Thankfully, there aren't really many tempting things to buy, and most of the stuff is available as free loot anyway, so souls will be used mostly for leveling up. At least that's how I hope you play the game. Please don't just waste all of your souls buying things from this crazy lady. These souls are always in general peril of being lost forever. Upon dying, you lose all your souls. If you make it back to where you died, you can regather the souls you dropped. If you die a second time before you do that though, you lose those souls forever. It doesn't matter if it's 10 or 10,000 souls, they're gone, eat shit. This is a common element in Dark Souls and really any other Souls-like game, and adds a nerve-wracking layer to the gameplay. When you die on your way to get your souls back, when you lose that boatload of souls forever, when you realize the amount of effort and time wasted, it will hurt your insides. You will be fucking pissed off. Maybe this game really is for masochists. It's because of this that it's in your best interest to try to die somewhere you can get to easily and quickly. So a good way of storing extra souls and not losing them is by not selling your stuff, since items can be stored and don't get lost when you die anyway. Another important gameplay element I wanted to bring up is bonfires. They're the game's checkpoints dotted about the maps. Here, all of your health, focus points, and Estus flasks are refilled, along with the unspoken guarantee that you'll respawn at this specific bonfire when you die next time. Finding and lighting these bonfires is crucial to advancing through the game as it prevents you from dying and having to re-travel through the same segments over and over again. They also act as the game's fast travel points, which is great because backtracking is always tedious. Since they recently added it back, I should mention the messaging system and the overall online gameplay aspect of Dark Souls. Plastered about the world like graffiti are these messages left by other players. The catch is that players can only create messages by piecing together pre-written words and phrases. This can add a layer of mystery to the messages left behind. Mostly though, it'll be messages warning you of an ambush or enticing you to roll off of a random cliff. At least you can rate these messages, and if you happen to leave one and someone rates it up, you get a free Estus flask. Very handy in the middle of a boss fight. Aside from the message system, spirits, aka dickbags, can invade your world and kick your balls in if you're embered. And if you're willing to put in a little bit of effort, you can also team up with some friends and fuck up some bosses together. Dark Souls 3 looks absolutely alluring and epic. There is a haunting elegance created by the dark fantasy and gothic elements. Everything mixes together in order to create a very moody atmosphere of hopelessness. Despite being relatively linear, it's very intricately designed and surprisingly well put together, with secrets strewn about in hidden nooks and crannies. The impossibility of some of the architecture and dimensions of the buildings are eye-catching to say the least. You'll find yourself drawn in immediately, and the game will fill you with the sense of curiosity a small child would have about the world around them. Not helping this fact is that there's nothing to tell you where to go. There's no mini-maps or quest markers, so exploration is the only way forward in this game. The sound design is great too. Ironically, during regular gameplay you won't hear any music, which sounds kind of boring and like it's a bad thing, but it actually adds to the overall mood. Hearing nothing but the wind in the background, along with the occasional footsteps of patrolling enemies, adds to the sense of deadness in the game, as though time no longer moves forward. Music does appear in boss fights, and when it does appear, it's absolutely fucking fantastic. The music is the only thing larger than some of these bosses, and it does an amazing job at setting the mood and atmosphere. On the topic of sound, the voice acting is great. It's so dramatic and moving without being cheesy or having long drawn-out dialogue.
You're in search of the Lords of Cinder, I trust. A toilsome journey, I'd wager. You'll require good arms.
Weapons, armor, trinkets, and spells. I've lots of little things to ease the burden of a weary traveler.
I may be but small, but I will die a colossus.
It's also very cryptic, which leads me to talk about the story. Okay, the story is one of the biggest things about this game that threw me off as a newcomer. Compared to something like, say, The Elder Scrolls, where there's piles of lore lying around everywhere to read through, Dark Souls 3 gives nothing but breadcrumbs of story. When I first bought this game, I went in thinking, oh man, I'm gonna get into this popular game that everyone likes, I'm gonna get into the story really hard and be a fan of this world like everyone else. After an hour or two of playing, I started realizing that I hadn't come any closer to understanding why I was doing what I was doing, or where I was in relation to previous Dark Souls. The game makes you piece together the world using item descriptions and the few lines of dialogue spoken by NPCs. The dialogue itself is also lightly encrypted in ye old Shakespearean English.
Knowest thou of that soppy gossip? That cordial intrusion layeth the path to embers.
If substantiation be thy want, set thine eyes upon my charred course.
The story is there for sure, but if you're new to the series, it might not be completely obvious what you're doing all of this for when you first start off. Even after you figure out the main gist of the story, you'll find yourself wanting deeper explanations, but there just aren't any. It doesn't need them. There's some callbacks and references to previous games, but from what I can tell, the story is just kind of there to set up the gameplay. There's no talk or mention of a need for money, food, or water, or anything really. Granted, everyone in this game is technically undead, but it certainly feels as though the world and everyone within simply exists for the sake of the adventure. Not in a bad way at all. Please hold your dislikes, everyone. Games don't need novels of text to read through to be good, but much like older games where the story was second to gameplay, the world of Dark Souls 3 is one that doesn't rely very much on things like why or how, it just is. You're here to kill big shit with swords, not read books. For example, this is the Great Sword of Balsakia. Where and what is Balsakia? It doesn't matter, it's a giant anime sword. Stop asking irrelevant questions. Honestly, this is a good thing. It means you can pick this game up and, despite being 3 games into the series, not really be too much out of the know than other players. This also helps you focus more on playing the game and getting better at it too. Though you probably will have that initial feeling of, am I missing something here? That might just be my opinion though. Overall, Dark Souls 3 is an amazing game. For a lot of people, myself included, who don't fancy the idea of a difficult game, Dark Souls 3 will change your mind. You'll start to see the beauty of your struggle and the improvement of your abilities. You'll realize that you don't need some intricate kudzu vine story to make an interesting world that draws you in. I definitely recommend this game. It's easier to pick up than you'd think, and it definitely keeps you in that what happens next mentality as good as any other game could, if not better. I'd say, yes, this game is very much worth still playing and should be for ages. Why the fuck did I even ask this question? Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you liked this review. If you did, please like and subscribe and check out my other videos. Be sure to leave a comment as well, and I'll see you next time.